The silent trap that keeps your body stuck in the past is not a lack of awareness about the traumas. What holds you is the way the constant search for healing turns the nervous system into the guardian of cycles that should already have ended. While the mind accumulates insights and emotional language becomes more refined, the organism remains operating as if the danger was still present, repeating states of rigidity, vigilance, and collapse even decades after the threat has disappeared. What will be revealed in the next few minutes is a unique gesture of somatic closure capable of informing the body that the cycle has ended and that the now can finally be inhabited as real territory. There is a specific signal that trauma recognizes as an ending, but that signal is not cognitive. It does not come from understanding or narrative. It comes from a physical orientation that updates the reading of time in the nervous system. If you leave this video now, you will continue forcing healing processes that keep the body spinning around what has already passed, missing the exact moment when this automatic repetition begins to give way and the present emerges as measurable space in the chest, in the breath, and at the base of the spine. What shaped the defense that still governs your body is about to meet the gesture that undoes it. The body does not distinguish memory from presence when a survival cycle remains open. What keeps that cycle active is not the intensity of what happened, but the absence of a physical signal that indicates completion. Without that signal, the organism preserves the original defense as if it were current information, shaping each breath, each muscular tension, each reaction to touch as a response to a threat that exists only in the implicit record. This phenomenon has a name in ancient somatic traditions. It was recognized in rites of passage long before neuroscience existed. What you are about to discover is the specific gesture that the nervous system recognizes as closure. In transition ceremonies, ancestral cultures understood that intense experiences needed bodily acts in order to be completed. Shamans guided deliberate movements, boundary postures, and breaths that created physical borders between what was and what could begin. They were not metaphors or empty symbols. They were somatic technologies that informed the organism that the threat had ceased and that the territory of the present was safe to inhabit. The body recognized these gestures as exit portals, allowing old defenses to be released without collapse. This recognition happens because the autonomic nervous system operates through implicit memory, a record that lives below consciousness and governs automatic responses. When a defense settles in without completion, it becomes a baseline pattern, activating in the face of any stimulus the organism interprets as similar to the original threat. The problem is that this interpretation is not rational. It happens through reading tone, posture, spatial orientation. If the body remains in a defensive configuration, it continues signaling danger to itself, feeding the cycle. What interrupts this repetition is not understanding. It is physical reconfiguration that updates the reading of safety. Researchers in polyvagal theory discovered that autonomic states persist because the vagus nerve keeps defense pathways activated when it does not receive bodily indicators of resolution. The organism needs to feel a clear boundary, defined spatial orientation, and a breath that reaches depth in order to interpret that the cycle has ended. When these three elements combine in a specific way, the nervous system can deactivate survival responses and return to a state of presence. The gesture that will be taught here organizes exactly this triad, creating for the first time in years the physical experience of now as territory separate from what was. This becomes essential when you realize that all chronic rigidity, all defensive procrastination, all sensation of life on pause is connected to cycles that never received somatic closure. The exhaustion of always working on yourself without crossing the threshold into the present is not a personal failure. It is a sign that the body is still waiting for the physical command that allows it to let go of the defense. There is someone who spent years in this trap, accumulating awareness while the organism remained stuck, until finding the gesture that finally signaled an ending. And what happened with this person will show how transformation manifests when the body recognizes that it can stop defending itself. Kelly was 54 years old and worked as a nursing assistant at a private hospital on the outskirts of Portland, where she cared for patients recovering from orthopedic surgeries. Her days followed familiar protocols, but even in the familiar repetition of shifts, something in her body remained tense, as if it were constantly anticipating mistake or confrontation. It wasn't the job that exhausted her. It was living in chronic readiness even when nothing required defense, as if the organism had forgotten that there was permission to rest. She noticed this in the intervals between one patient and another. When the chest remained braced, the breath held between the ribs, the shoulders raised holding invisible weight that no one else was putting there. The pattern Kelly carried had its origin in the marriage that had ended 8 years earlier, but the legal divorce had not closed the somatic response she developed during 15 years of trying to predict mood changes, measure words before speaking, anticipate reactions to avoid confrontation. Even living alone, the body remained in vigilance mode, as if it still needed to calculate every movement, monitor every tone of voice, be ready to withdraw or justify. This showed up in small things that seemed unimportant but governed her whole life. Difficulty making simple decisions without diffuse anxiety. Inability to fully relax even on days off. Constant sensation of preparing for something that never arrived. The mind understood that the danger had passed, but the nervous system kept operating as if the threat were in the room next door. She had tried cognitive behavioral therapy for 2 years, building detailed understanding about relational patterns and the origin of defensive responses. She attended restorative yoga classes, where she could loosen tensions for a few minutes before they returned. She practiced guided meditation every morning for almost a year, developing the capacity to observe anxious thoughts without getting lost in them. None of these approaches touched the root of the problem because they all worked with awareness and mental regulation. But the body kept holding defensive states active, waiting for a different kind of information that never arrived through words or intentions. The discovery happened when Kelly was organizing the belongings of a patient who was being discharged after hip surgery. Among the personal objects, there was a book about somatic trauma that the patient commented she had started reading after years suffering from chronic pains that no exam could identify. She described how certain pains in the body were physical memories of old events, and how a specialized physical therapist had taught a specific gesture of closure that for the first time in decades had made the rigidity truly give way. Kelly asked the name of the book, wrote it down with a hand trembling slightly, because something inside her recognized she was about to find what no previous therapy had named. That night, she bought the digital book and read until she found the exact description of the gesture that created a physical boundary between past and present. Alone in the living room, Kelly applied the gesture for the first time. She stood with her feet hip-width apart, established clear spatial orientation by feeling the floor under the soles of her feet, placed one hand at the center of her chest, and created physical awareness of a boundary between the space in front of her and the space behind her. She took a deep breath while repeating internally that the cycle was closed. In the first seconds, nothing changed besides the strangeness of the movement. Then a subtle release began in the solar plexus. It wasn't muscular relaxation, it was something deeper, as if an internal latch that had held the body in a defensive position for years began to give way for the first time. That exact instant where Kelly's organism began to recognize the closure is what is going to happen now in your own body. The gesture of somatic closure that you are going to learn now acts exactly where the concept revealed earlier manifests. At the point where the body keeps defensive responses active because it never received a physical signal of completion. This is not about relaxing or releasing superficial tensions, but about creating a clear bodily reference that informs the nervous system that the cycle has ended, and that the present can be inhabited as real territory. The practice happens in 3 layers that integrate: spatial orientation, bodily boundary, and closing breath. Each of these layers speaks directly to implicit memory, updating the safety reading that governs autonomic states. Begin by standing with your feet hip-width apart, the entire soles of your feet touching the floor. Feel the weight of the body descending through the legs, creating firm contact with the surface below. Do not force stability, just allow gravity to do the work of anchoring the body in the present space. Now bring attention to spatial orientation. Consciously perceive the space in front of you and the space behind you. This is not visualization, it is physical perception of territory, as if the body were creating a sensory map of the environment around it. This orientation is fundamental because the nervous system uses spatial references to determine whether it is in safety or threat. Place one hand at the center of the chest, over the sternum, with light but present pressure. The other hand can rest at the side of the body or supported on the abdomen, whatever feels more stable. The hand on the chest functions as a physical boundary marker, creating awareness of a limit between what is inside the body and what is outside. This touch is not comfort, it is somatic information that the organism interprets as definition of personal territory. Breathe deeply 3 times, allowing the exhale to be slightly longer than the inhale, without forcing the rhythm. Just observe how the air enters, fills the chest, and leaves, taking with it the urgency to keep defenses active. Now comes the layer of internal verbal closure. While maintaining the posture, the spatial orientation, and the steady breath, repeat internally with clarity. The cycle is closed, the danger is over, this body inhabits the now. You do not need to fully believe the words. What matters is that they are said while the body sustains the physical configuration of boundary and orientation. The nervous system does not respond only to the sentence, it responds to the combination of posture, breath, and declared intention simultaneously. Repeat this 3 times, letting each repetition settle in the organism before moving to the next. After the 3rd repetition, observe what begins to change in the body's tone. It may be subtle at first, a slight reduction in shoulder tension, an exhale that drops a little deeper than the previous ones, a sensation of internal space that was not present before. It can also be warmth in the center of the chest, weight leaving the nape of the neck, a jaw that softens without conscious command. What matters is not the intensity of the change, but the recognition that something is yielding, that the body is beginning to register new information about safety and completion. If the body resists, if the sensation is of greater rigidity or discomfort, adjust the practice. You can do the gesture seated instead of standing, reduce the pressure of the hand on the chest, or simply maintain spatial orientation without adding the specific breath yet. Different bodies need different speeds to update defense records, and forcing rapid opening can be interpreted as threat. The objective is to create space for the organism to recognize completion in its own time, not to impose change through will. Respect the rhythm that the nervous system is signaling and advance only when there is a perceptible reduction in vigilance. Before deepening the second layer of the practice, there is something essential about Kelly that you need to know. Something that will illuminate exactly what is beginning to happen in your body now. When Kelly applied the gesture for the first time and felt the internal latch begin to give way, it was not immediate relief that came. It was a profound strangeness. For the first time in years, the body was not in readiness. It was not calculating danger. It was not preparing to defend or justify. She realized she had forgotten what it was like to inhabit the present without background vigilance. And the first days of this new perception brought disorientation because the organism needed to relearn how to operate without the constant alarm that had become identity. But as she repeated the gesture daily, concrete changes began to manifest, not only internally, but in the way she moved through the world. The chronic rigidity that no stretching had resolved began to truly give way, especially in the region of the solar plexus and at the base of the neck. Kelly noticed she could make simple decisions without the diffuse anxiety that had previously paralyzed even everyday choices, as if the body had stopped interpreting each action as potential error. For the first time since the divorce, she began a personal project she had been postponing for years. Not because she found special motivation, but because defensive procrastination simply stopped governing movement. More importantly, the breath began to drop naturally into the abdomen without conscious effort, a sign that the nervous system was finally recognizing safety as a baseline state, not as a temporary exception. What Kelly discovered by repeating the gesture over the weeks was that somatic closure is not a single event, it is a maintenance practice. The body needed to be reminded regularly that the cycle had ended, especially in moments of stress or when old patterns tried to take command again. But each time she applied the gesture, the return to the state of presence happened faster, as if the organism were memorizing the path back to now. What is happening in your body at this moment is exactly the beginning of that updating process. The first time the nervous system receives clear physical information that it can stop defending what has already passed. Now that the body has begun to register boundary and orientation, the second layer of the practice deepens the closure through a specific breath that anchors the new state. Maintain the standing or seated posture, the hand on the chest, and the spatial orientation you have already established. We will add a breathing pattern that signals to the vagus nerve that the defensive response can be deactivated. Inhale, counting to 4. Hold the breath for 2 seconds, then exhale, counting to 6. The exhale longer than the inhale is what communicates safety to the autonomic nervous system, activating the ventral branch of the vagus that governs states of connection and presence. Repeat this breathing cycle 5 times, keeping attention not only on the rhythm but on the quality of the exhale. Let the air leave through slightly parted lips, as if you were releasing internal pressure accumulated for years. Do not force the air out. Allow it to flow naturally while you keep the count. With each exhale, observe whether there is additional reduction in body tension, whether the jaw softens, whether the shoulders drop, whether the chest that was braced begins to yield. What is happening physiologically is an update of the threat reading. The body is rewriting implicit records that kept defenses active as a permanent pattern. The integration between spatial orientation, bodily boundary, and closing breath creates a synergy that no isolated technique can produce. The posture establishes present territory. The hand on the chest defines personal boundary. The breath signals safety to the autonomic system. When these 3 layers operate simultaneously, the organism receives coherent information on multiple levels, allowing survival responses to finally shut off because the set of signals points to real completion of the cycle. It is not mental persuasion, it is somatic language that the body understands without needing cognitive translation. Finish the practice by maintaining the posture for 30 more seconds in internal silence, simply observing the state the body sustains now compared to the state 5 minutes ago. Notice whether there is more space between thoughts, whether the breath has found natural depth, whether the urgency to do something or resolve something has diminished. These are marks that closure has begun to inscribe itself in the organism, that the nervous system is recognizing for the first time in a long time that it can inhabit the present without keeping background alarms active. The central practice is complete, and now comes the moment to seal this transformation in the body so that it becomes a portable resource you can access whenever the past tries to take command again. The physical marker that proves that closure has begun to inscribe itself in your body is in the quality of the breath. If you notice that the air now drops naturally into the abdomen without conscious effort, if the exhale happens with more depth and less resistance, if there is a reduction in the sensation of a braced chest or contracted solar plexus, the nervous system is recognizing that the cycle has ended and that the state of vigilance can be deactivated. This is not temporary relaxation that disappears when attention turns to something else. It is an update of the implicit record that remains active as the body memorizes the new reference of safety. To anchor this state as a portable resource, you will use a signal gesture that can be repeated anywhere without drawing attention. Place your right hand over the center of the chest for 3 deep breaths, maintaining awareness of spatial orientation while you repeat internally, "The cycle is closed. I inhabit the now." This touch combined with the phrase works as a somatic shortcut that reactivates the state of completion whenever the body begins to return to old patterns of defense. Practice this once a day during the next week so that the organism memorizes the gesture as a command to return to the present. When you feel the old rigidity returning, the breath rising again into the chest, or diffuse vigilance taking control again, apply the return protocol immediately. Stand or sit, establish clear spatial orientation by perceiving the space in front and behind. Place your hand on your chest and do 3 breathing cycles with an exhale longer than the inhale. Repeat internally, "The danger is over. This body no longer needs to defend itself." What keeps cycles open is the lack of repetition of the closure signal, but now you have the exact tool to inform the nervous system that the past no longer governs the present. The seal is complete, and what happens from here depends on how you sustain in the body what was discovered in these minutes. The body that sustains deeper breath, less background vigilance, and the ability to inhabit the present without reacting to the past is not the same body that started this video. Something changed in the way the organism interprets safety, in the speed with which it can deactivate internal alarms, in the permission that finally exists to move forward without resolving everything first. This change is not abstract. It lives in the quality of the exhale, in the softening of the solar plexus, in the reduction of chronic rigidity that no stretching had touched. The nervous system memorized for the first time in years that cycles can end and that the present is real territory, not just a mental concept. The somatic closure you applied here opens the way to other layers of release that are still waiting for a signal of completion in the body. Each defensive pattern installed at different moments in life carries its own somatic signature, its own unlocking gesture. The knowledge revealed in this video is a gateway to bodily wisdom that integrates traumas without reliving them, that closes cycles without needing to revisit narratives. There is continuity in this journey for those who recognize that true transformation happens when the body finally registers change, not only when the mind understands. Peter Levine wrote, "Trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside of us in the absence of an empathetic witness." What was applied here is exactly that somatic witnessing, the gesture that allows the organism to let go of what it preserved for decades, waiting for permission to release. The source that governs the completion of natural cycles operates through the body, not in spite of it. Each breath that drops into the abdomen, each defense that finally yields, each moment in which the present becomes inhabitable is an expression of the creative intelligence that shapes life through conscious matter. God is not separate from the organism that recognizes closure. God is inscribed in the capacity to update implicit records and allow the past to be left behind. If this content brought concrete change in your body, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. Your interaction sustains the continuity of this work and allows more people to have access to somatic knowledge that unites ancestral wisdom with modern neuroscience. Write in the comments, "I recognize the end of the cycle and I inhabit the present without defense." By declaring this publicly, you anchor the transformation in consciousness and create a witnessing of change that the organism recognizes as real commitment. If you want to continue exploring other layers of somatic release and discover where else the body still holds defenses that ask for closure, click the video that is appearing on the screen to continue this journey. The body that recognizes the end of a cycle carries wisdom that no mind alone can reach. It knows when to let go, when to integrate, when to allow the present to finally begin.